U.S. President Donald Trump is warning of very severe consequences if Russia's Vladimir Putin doesn't agree to stop his war in Ukraine. The two leaders are just a day away from holding one-on-one talks in the U.S. state of Alaska. Trump says it will be Putin's only chance to show his commitment for peace. The comments follow a virtual meeting with European leaders and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelenskyy. They told Trump that Europe would never accept the ceding of any Ukrainian territory to Russia.
It was a busy day of diplomacy in Berlin, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy met one of his key allies, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. After their talks, Merz hosted a virtual meeting with other European leaders, followed by a call with U.S. President Donald Trump, all ahead of Trump's summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday. Neither Zelenskyy nor any Europeans are invited to that meeting, fueling concerns that Putin will push for Ukraine to give up territory for a ceasefire, something Zelenskyy has repeatedly rejected.
Today, we also address these issues, which are very complex. I want to emphasize that any matters affecting Ukraine's territorial integrity cannot be discussed without the participation of our state, the will of our people, and in accordance with the Constitution of Ukraine.
Speaking alongside Zelenskyy, the German Chancellor reiterated his call for Ukraine to be part of any negotiations to end the war. He also stressed that Kyiv needed real security guarantees.
Ukraine is open to discussing questions of territory, but the so-called line of contact must be the starting point, and legal recognition of Russia's occupation is out of the question. The basic principle must remain: borders cannot be changed by force.
Trump, for his part, called the discussion positive.
We had a very good call. He was on the call. President Zelenskyy was on the call. I would rate it a 10, very, very friendly.
Will Russia face any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
There will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences, yes.
As Trump prepares for his summit with Putin in Alaska, all eyes will be on whether Ukraine and its European allies succeeded in closing ranks with the U.S. president and sending a clear message that Ukraine's sovereignty is non-negotiable.
Let's bring in our correspondents, Lisa Lewis and Nick Connolly. Nick is reporting from Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, and Lisa is covering Russia from Riga, as DW is, as you know, banned from reporting from Russia. Nick, let's start with you. Volodymyr Zelenskyy is trying to shore up support ahead of Friday's meeting in Alaska. Is he likely to be satisfied with the results so far?
I think this was always going to be the compensation prize, the second best option to actually being at that meeting in Alaska on Friday. But certainly there is a sense that the Europeans were able to coordinate a message that Trump was able to digest. They kept their statements short, that they were consistent, that they divided up the roles in these calls between the different European leaders in a way that would actually get Trump to listen. So I think that certainly is something that is seen as a success in a situation that is far from ideal. We've got President Zelenskyy of Ukraine in the UK, in London today, after that visit to Berlin, basically trying to show as much presence as possible and to keep the Ukrainian side of this deal, of any potential deal, in everyone's minds and in the headlines.
Lisa, in Riga, is Putin likely to be concerned about the influence the European leaders could have on Trump? Trump is now warning that Putin will face severe consequences, as he said, if he does not agree to stop the war.
Well, I think it's fair to say that Putin doesn't seem intimidated, at least if you judge from what the deputy spokesperson of the Russian Foreign Ministry said yesterday. He said that these consultations requested by Europeans were politically insignificant. He also said that Europeans were saying that they were trying to help achieve peace, a deal, but that they were actually trying to sabotage the talks. And that's also something that has been reflected in Russian papers, Kremlin-friendly papers over the past few days, basically saying that they were watching Europe closely for any moves that could thwart the outcome, thwart the fact to achieve a result in these talks. So the Kremlin is pointing the finger at Europe to prepare for the case that there is no real outcome of the talks, to say that it's not the Kremlin's fault.
Nick, you said it. It's far from ideal for the Ukrainians to not have a seat at the table there in Alaska. What outcome are they hoping for from the Trump-Putin meeting on Friday?
I think there are two main Ukrainian kind of wants from this meeting. The first thing is about the chronology, about what comes first as opposed to coming later. So the Russians want to talk about territories and about forcing Ukraine to give up territory that it still controls, whereas the Ukrainian position is that this has to be a ceasefire first of all, and then we talk about everything else after. So it's about that chronology, the kind of the what comes first in the negotiation process. And then the second thing, and that's a message that seemingly was also put to Trump by European leaders yesterday during that call, is real security guarantees for Ukraine. If there is any kind of solution to this war, if there's any freezing of this conflict, Ukraine needs real security guarantees. Even if that's not NATO, that seems less likely now. We've heard the Trump team saying they don't want Ukraine in NATO, but some kind of real guarantees that Ukraine can rely on to know that this is not just going to be a pause before a restart of this war.
Lisa, what does Russia want from the meeting on Friday?
Well, it seems that Putin is not willing to cede any ground, at least if you judge from what you can read in Russian papers. Putin has been asking for a regime change in Ukraine. He's been asking for the country to be demilitarized. He also wants to keep the 4 regions that Russia is now partly occupying, saying that it is part of Russia according to the constitution. So it seems that the two positions, Ukraine's position and Russia's position, are very far away indeed.
I want to end on a question to both of you. What's the one thing you'll be watching for most closely when Trump and Putin sit down in Anchorage tomorrow? Lisa first and then Nick.
I think the one thing to watch is if Donald Trump really adopts Putin's view. If he said, it's all Zelensky's fault that the war started. He has said that in the past. Obviously, Ukraine was invaded by Russia. Will Trump repeat that he will impose sanctions if there is no outcome, or will he be schmoozed by Vladimir Putin? That is something that we should be watching very closely.
Nick?
And I think it's going to be about the body language too. Every time you see Donald Trump meet Volodymyr Zelenskyy, especially in that bust-up in the Oval Office, the body language is very tense, and at best it's kind of lukewarm. So to see how kind of warm and how kind of effusive he is with Putin, you'll remember when he had his last kind of big summit with Putin in 2018 in Helsinki, he went into that meeting and came out saying that he trusted what Putin had told him over what the US intelligence services had told him. So whether indeed it is a case with Trump, as has been the case, that the last person talking to him before he takes a decision is the one who has the kind of final sway over him, whether all this kind of preparation by the Europeans is going to achieve anything, that will be the major question coming out of the summit in Alaska.
Thank you so much. That was Nick Connolly in Kyiv and Lisa Lewis in Riga. And we can now speak to Michael Rühle. He served for over 30 years on NATO's international staff. Welcome to DW. Now, what did this call with President Trump actually achieve for Ukraine and its European allies?
Ideally, it will have achieved Europe and the West more generally singing from the same song sheet when it comes to dealing with Russia and dealing with Ukraine in the coming months. Of course, the Europeans went out of their way to get Donald Trump involved, and we'll see whether he will live up to the very positive view that he obviously had himself, as you just showed in your clip.
Mm-hmm. We heard European and Ukrainian officials say that they feel that Trump has taken their advice on board. Isn't there a danger, though, that the president could forget all of that when he's alone with Vladimir Putin?
That is indeed a danger, and that is the reason maybe why this whole frantic diplomatic activity took place over the last few days, to make sure that he doesn't go off the rails once he meets more or less alone with Putin. And that he has speaking points that stay on message, so to speak. Trump has a tendency to improvise, and Trump has a tendency to look at international negotiations more like real estate negotiations, and that I think is a latent problem that the Europeans try to minimize as much as they possibly could.
all of that said, do you think Ukraine can trust Donald Trump to represent its best interests at this meeting?
I'm not able to speak for Ukraine, but I think the Ukrainians, by having President Zelenskyy in Berlin and joining the meeting with Trump, has also gone out of its way to make sure that Trump is acting as in good faith when he deals with Putin. One of the things that seemed to have been accepted by everyone around the table was that there will be no solution about Ukraine's future being discussed without Ukraine present. So I think this is already a big success for Zelenskyy. But you do not know what's going to happen when Trump and Putin start talking more or less on their own.
And so far, there has been little sign that Putin is really listening to Trump, hasn't there? So why does Donald Trump think he can make him listen now?
Well, one explanation could be that the Russians, although they make some small progress on the battlefield, are would probably prefer a pause of sorts, because they're making progress, but at tremendous losses, tremendous cost. And so the idea of a pause of whatever form could be interesting for Putin. And maybe that's a point where Trump can a point that Trump can use to get something more meaningful out of Putin. But nobody knows exactly what happens, all the more so, or the less so, since Trump himself is, I think, very unclear about what kind of punitive sanctions he would, or other steps he would take if Putin doesn't play along.
Exactly, because Donald Trump is not just looking at a pause, is he? He wants this war to end, and he has warned of very severe consequences. Do you think he really means that? And what could those consequences be?
Well, so far he has threatened a lot, but he hasn't done very much. In fact, there's still this suspicion that Putin will sway him with all kinds of economic projects that he knows Trump is very interested in. Sanctions have been threatened, but deadlines have passed and nothing has happened. So basically, Trump doesn't look like a very strong, determined leader when it comes to this particular aspect of his foreign policy.
It's an interesting point you raise here, because we all know that Putin doesn't really seem all that interested in peace in Ukraine. Do you think he might actually use this meeting with Trump in Alaska to discuss other issues, like a reset in U.S.-Russian relations, or the broader issue of NATO expansion, all of these things that he keeps talking about, rather than pursuing a diplomatic end to this war?
I think this is a realistic prospect, and one that is that Europeans are fearful of, and Ukrainians are fearful of. Trump has shown in the past that he has a strong interest in economic relations, in beefing up American economy, witness the tariff business, and he sees probably Russia as a future business partner, and that makes that clouds these negotiations, if there are negotiations at all, to a certain degree, because Putin can read Trump better than probably Trump can read Putin.
That was former NATO official Michael Rühle. Thank you so much for all your insights.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, the Russian army says it's captured 2 villages close to Dobropilya in eastern Ukraine. It's potentially the biggest Russian advance in the region in the past year.
Residents of this Ukrainian town in the Donetsk region say Russian strikes have intensified in recent days. The bombardment, combined with the advance of ground troops, is forcing many to flee. You have to leave everything behind, your belongings, because you take 2 bags and leave, and start a new life, as they say. That's our life. Russian forces have been closing in, making territorial gains around the city of Pokrovsk. Footage released by the Russian Defense Ministry and verified by Reuters showed Russian ground troops pushing past the front lines in eastern Ukraine.
Today we received reports from our military on the front line, especially in the direction of Dobrovyria and Pokrovsk. Steps have been taken there to remedy the situation, and I am grateful to every unit, every one of our soldiers who is now destroying the occupiers. Positions in the Kharkiv, Zaporizhia and Sumy regions, we are trying everywhere to provide Ukraine with exactly the protection it needs.
The US-based Institute for the Study of War says it is too soon to call the advances an operational level breakthrough, but it believes the timing, just before the Alaska talks between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, is a calculated move to influence the negotiations.